This morning, we're going to start with a piece of liturgy to kind of set the tone and get us going here. And I want you to participate. You're used to this from our worship services. What you see in red, I want you to repeat. I'm going to read some passages of liturgy from the Apocrypha that I think will sound familiar to you. I hope so. And it's audience participation. So this passage begins, as you see on the slide there. Blessed art thou, O Lord, God of our fathers, and worthy of praise, and thy name is glorified forever. For thou art just in all that thou hast done to us, and all thy works are true, and thy ways right, and all thy judgments are truth. Thou hast executed true judgments in all that thou hast brought upon us, and upon Jerusalem, the holy city of thy fathers. For in truth and justice thou hast brought all this upon us, because of our sins. For we have sinned lawlessly, departed from thee, and have sinned in all things, have not obeyed thy commandments. We've not observed them or done them as thou hast commanded us, that it might go well with us. So, all that thou hast brought upon us, and all that thou hast done to us, thou hast done in true judgment. And the passage goes on. I'm going to skip some of this. I'm going to read a series of verses of blessing that all begin with this phrase, blessed art thou. Please repeat that after me. Blessed art thou.
Blessed art thou.
Blessed art thou, O Lord God of our fathers, to be praised and highly exalted forever. And blessed is thy glorious holy name, and to be highly praised and exalted. Blessed art thou in the temple of thy holy glory, and to be extolled and highly glorified forever. You heard a lot about the temple last week, if you were here for Adrian's presentation. Blessed art thou who sittest upon cherubim and lookest upon the deeps, and to be praised and highly exalted forever.
Blessed art thou
upon the throne of thy kingdom, and to be extolled and highly exalted forever.
Blessed art thou
in the firmament of the heaven, and to be sung and glorified forever. And then it switches gears a little bit, and the people say, bless the Lord. Bless the Lord, all the works of the Lord. Sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever. Sound familiar?
Bless the Lord.
Bless the Lord, ye heavens. Sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever.
Bless the Lord.
Bless the Lord, ye angels of the Lord. Sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever. You're going to hear this morning about some angels. Pretty powerful stuff.
Bless the Lord.
Bless the Lord, all powers. Sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever. You get the idea?
Bless the Lord.
Bless the Lord. But I was pitiful. Who's be in the temple?
Bless the Lord.
There you go. Sun and moon, sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever.
Bless the Lord.
Stars of heaven, sing praise to him and highly exalt him forever.
Bless the Lord.
All rain and dew,
Bless the Lord.
all winds,
Bless the Lord.
fire and heat,
Bless the Lord.
winter cold and summer heat. This goes on and on and on and on until we get to the end. Give thanks to the Lord our God. Here, you do this with me, since you're all fired up now. Let's see. Ready? Bless the Lord. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Bless him, all you worship the Lord, the God of gods. Sing praise to him, and give thanks to him, for his mercy verses come from a text called the Song of the Three Young Men. This is a good portion of that song from verses 29 to 68. When you see or hear three young men, knowing your Bible, who do you think are singing this song? Who are these three young men? There you go. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I once had somebody I worked with, an African-American woman, who swore to me that she went to church one Sunday and heard a preacher preach an awesome sermon about Shadrach, Meshach, and a baby goat. There you go. You're exactly right. These are the three young men in the book of Daniel. Three young men who are thrown into the fire because they refused to worship the king, Nebuchadnezzar, or a statue of him. And everybody knows that story. That story is a crucial part, actually, of the Apocrypha. And this is the list that we had a couple of weeks ago when I was just kind of reviewing for you, surveying the whole content of the Apocrypha. This is it, the Old Testament Apocrypha. And sort of just beyond the middle there are the prayer of Azariah and this song of the three young men. I'm going to talk about that, show you a little bit more about it. This is just a reminder also of where we've been, the pieces of the Apocrypha that we've looked at, focused on in the last couple of weeks. We started on week 1 with the books of Esdras, the two apocryphal books of Ezra, which recount, between them, they both recount the same history of the dispersed Jewish people and their return to Jerusalem and the construction of the Second Temple. Most of the book of, all of the book of Ezra and most of the book of Nehemiah. And then there's some other stuff in there. Part of that is history, and Second Esdras gets into an apocalyptic vision that Ezra had. Actually, four of them. Pretty interesting stuff. Last week we had Dr. Smith. I hope you enjoyed him. I just think he's a fascinating speaker. He is so passionate about what he studies. And I learned a lot about the wisdom of Solomon, more pointedly about the whole concept of wisdom from the ancient world, which these Jewish people, with the help of their prophets, of course, eventually transmogrified into their understanding of the one true God, who is the God of wisdom. You'll see also right in the middle of the books in the Apocrypha, a couple of other wisdom books. In fact, the longest book in the Apocrypha is Ecclesiasticus, which really the name of that book is The Wisdom of Jesus, the son of Sirach. And it's usually titled, or the shorthand for that is the Book of Sirach. The church, the early Roman church, kind of renamed that book Ecclesiasticus. That's very telling. That means the book of the church. This is the longest book in the Apocrypha. It reads an awful lot like Proverbs. It's just a lengthy compendium of wisdom sayings, some of which are almost word for word the same as Proverbs in the Old Testament. And so I talked a little bit about the book of Baruch and the sort of appendage, the letter of Jeremiah that was later added to it. This morning, we're going to talk about the rest of the story. And you tell that the Song of the Three Young Men, the prayer of Azariah 2, is poetry. And that's why I like to start here this morning, because it makes a natural, you can see how this text is related to the wisdom of Solomon that you heard about last week, which is all in poetry. And there's a strong liturgical element. It is pretty clear. I hope you kind of got a feel for it even, that these materials were certainly used in the late Jewish period and also in the new, early New Testament church as part of their worship, their celebration, their worship of God. But where I want to spend most of my time, and this will not surprise any of you who know me, is to focus on the pieces of the Apocrypha that are clearly fiction. They're some of the best short fiction, some of the best short stories in world literature are in these books. The book of Tobit, Judith, Susanna, Belle and the Dragon. And then we're going to wrap up with what's left, which is more history. Some of that history from early in the destruction of the first temple, and then some of it from later, after the destruction, including the destruction of the second temple. So that's kind of where we're going, and that's pretty much going to wrap it up for us. If you go back for a second and talk about these additions to the book of Daniel, there's more than one. I mentioned the first one appears in both the Greek Old Testament, which is called the Septuagint. We've talked about that before, the 70 there, and the Vulgate. That's a fancy Latin word for the Latin version, the Latin translation of the Old Testament. In both of those books, between Daniel chapter 3, verse 23 and verse 24, are added these two pieces. The first is the prayer of Azariah. Azariah is the name he goes by in Hebrew. His Greek name is Abednego, or the Billy Goat. You heard, I hope, because you participated in the liturgical part of it, that the prayer, that first part, the first section that I read, is part of the prayer of Azariah. This is a prayer that he makes when he's put into the pit, or the fiery furnace. That's the way it's often translated. He raises his head, he looks up to heaven, and he makes this prayer. And he says from the get-go, he doesn't say, "Ooh, it's hot in here. Lord, get me out." He says, "This is just. We are justly, God, you are justly punishing us. We have sinned." The whole Jewish people, destroying Jerusalem, allowing Jerusalem to be destroyed, allowing us to be dispersed. Absolutely just. But, he says, for thy name's sake, do not give us up utterly. That's the heart of the prayer. Don't give us up. Do not break thy covenant. Do not withdraw thy mercy from us. Then he goes on for a little bit. That second part, with the blessed art thou and bless the Lord, are the song of the three young men. Abednego, of course, one of those three. And so on the heels of Azariah's prayer, all three of them kind of join in to really what is a moment of worship. And about the first, maybe quarter of that song, as it's described, is addressed directly to God, as Azariah's prayer was, of course. They say, God, blessed art thou. Blessed are you for this and that, all this stuff. And then in verse 35, it turns around and addresses all that God has made. Everything. And that's that long, long list. We only did part of it, but the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the rain, and the summer and winter, and every single thing. Bless the Lord. Also added to the book of Daniel, in both the Greek and the Latin versions of the Old Testament, is the book of Susanna. This is a great story. It appears in different places, in different versions different translations of the Hebrew Old Testament. But in both the Greek and the Latin, it comes at the end of the book of Daniel. There are 12 chapters in the book of Daniel. And if you can go back and look at an older version of the Bible, even some English, early English Bibles, Daniel would have chapter 13. Chapter 13 would be the story of Susanna. Sometimes in later versions, it appears at the front as chapter 1 of Daniel. And you'll see why in a minute. Don't have time, and you're probably not interested in going through the whole story. This is the whole story in outline. Susanna she's presented in the first few chapters as a stunningly beautiful, also super pious, super faithful Jewish woman of the diaspora. She is particularly faithful, vigilant about the dietary, the food laws of the Old Testament. And in chapter 5, these two elders, and that is the word that is used, these two elders reveal to each other, it's kind of a weird moment, they reveal to each other that they're both they can't help it. They're both so attracted to Susanna because she's, for both reasons, she's physically beautiful, she's also spiritually beautiful, let's put it that way. And so they attempt to seduce her. They discover that she is taking a bath in the garden outside her house, and they plant themselves in the shrubbery. If this sounds familiar. And they spy on her, basically. It's a creepy, creepy thing for elders to be doing. And they attack her, and she will have nothing to do with it. She rebuffs them. She does a 2nd century BC Me Too moment. She calls them on it. These are very, very powerful men, by the way. She's not powerful at all. So they take her to court, and they accuse her of basically being a harlot, of trying to seduce them. And she is roundly condemned by the court, of course, of all Jewish men, other elders like these two. And she cries out to them. She says, I'm being unjustly treated here. This is not right. I didn't do it. I'm faithful, etc., etc. And this is where Daniel comes in. Daniel comes in and he says, what are you guys doing? You're taking the word, you're not accepting the word of one of the most faithful people you know. pause here and tell you a joke. Okay? College professor was sitting in his office one day. This was during the exam period, during exam week. And 3 students show up at the office, all 3 together. And they explained that they missed the exam. They did not take the exam that was scheduled earlier that day. Because they were together. They were all going one place or another in the car. Have you heard this one? And the car, they had a flat tire. And they were stranded by the roadside. They waited forever, right? And the professor being a wise professor, said, okay. And he decided to, I want to talk to each one of you individually. Each one by one, got them in the office, and he asked them one question. Which tire was it? This is basically what Daniel did in the trial, or the post-trial, the aftermath of Susanna's trial. He says, let me talk to those 2 guys separately. And he asked them the tire question. He said, what tree, one of the key pieces of evidence was, this all happened in her garden, under a tree. And Daniel asked the first one, he says, which tree was it? And that first elder says, well, it was a mastic tree. And Daniel said, you lie. You are lying. Gets the second one in. Says, let me talk to that one too. Gets the second one in. He says, what tree was it where all this supposedly happened? He said, oh, it was a yew tree. A yew tree. And Daniel called him out on that. The key to this whole story, as it says here, is verses 54 to 59. And I'm going to read that. Maybe. He says, after the second one, he says, now then, if you really saw her, tell me this. Under what tree did you see them being intimate with each other? They accused her of having an affair, basically, with another man, and they saw it. That was the accusation. And he said, very well, or the elder answered, under a mastic tree. And Daniel said, very well, you have lied against your own head. For the angel of God has received the sentence from God and will immediately cut you in 2. Then he put that one aside and commanded them to bring the other. And Daniel said to him, you offspring of Canaan and not of Judah, beauty has deceived you and lust has perverted your heart. This is how you've been dealing with each other. Now tell me, under what tree did you catch them being intimate with each other? And this one answered, well, under an evergreen oak. And Daniel said to him, very well, you also have lied against your own head. For the angel of God is waiting with his sword to saw you in 2, that he may destroy you both. And I won't get into it too much, but there's a pun in the Hebrew that is playing on the difference between these 2 trees and the verbs that we sometimes use to talk about very violent things. And so I'll just read a note here. The wordplay of the original may be represented in English by this paraphrase. Under a clove tree, the angel will cleave you, cut you in 2, right? And the second one, under a yew tree, the angel will hew you. Pretty funny. So those elders were condemned to death because that was the punishment under the Jewish law. And Susanna is praised, of course, for her virtue and her faithfulness and so on. And from that day forward, Daniel had a great reputation among people. That's the last verse of the book of Susanna. Bell and Dragon, you've been waiting for this for 3 weeks, right? Bell and Dragon is also an addition to the book of Daniel. In the Greek, these verses, this passages come after Daniel 12, so they're added as Daniel 13, I guess you could say. In the Latin, they come after Susanna. So there's kind of a sequence here. Here are the stories. There are 2 stories here, and these are both very short. The bell part, the introduction, by the way, tells us that these events took place during the Persian, the rule of Cyrus, the Persian king, who allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Cyrus, although he was good to the Jews as far as that goes, he was a typical, pagan, I guess you could say. He believed he had a large statue of himself made. You saw back on a earlier slide, I won't go back, that big statue with the gold head and the headpiece and so on. That was one sort of modern, not an uninformed guess about what that statue might have looked like. Apparently it was huge. And all of the Persians were commanded to bow down and worship that statue, the statue of Bel, B-E-L. Every night, this god would consume huge, mass quantities of food and drink in the temple to Bel, the god, to prove what? Why would they, that may sound like a really strange thing, but why would they every day want to see evidence that this statue, this giant god, was eating and drinking a lot? What would that prove? That he was alive. That he was alive. That he was a living God. And Daniel has none of that. Daniel, of course, knows that Bel is not a living God. He's not a living God. He's just a statue. And he says, I can prove it. And it's a jolly good thing he did, because if he hadn't proved it, Nebuchadnezzar said, I'm going to cut your head off. And Daniel says, give me one night. I'll show you. And so he put a seal on the door to the temple. Bel's temple, so that it would prove that he didn't go in there in the middle of the night, take all the food away, or whatever. And everybody gets up the next day, and they open the sealed temple door. They go in there. All this food and drink that had been, stocked in there at the end of the day for overnight, gone. And Nebuchadnezzar says, aha, I told you. Daniel says, wait just a minute. Ask your 70 priests and their families, where are all the food and drink? And it turns out that there was like a trap door and hidden tunnels into the temple that nobody could see, except the priests and their families. And they came in every night and ate all that food and drink. Their whole families, all of them. And Daniel caught them in that deception. And Nebuchadnezzar was appalled, of course. And so he has all of the priests, all all of his priests and their families killed. And the idol in the temple eventually too. The second story, the dragon story, Daniel refuses, in this case, to worship a big dragon, which was also presented as a god. And he says in this story that he will kill that dragon without a weapon. No sword, no club, nothing. And of course the people, say, there's no way he can do that. How's he going to do that? And in this story also, he is thrown into a den of lions because he's blaspheming against his pagan god and the king. And in this story, Habakkuk, does that name sound familiar? This is the same Habakkuk the prophet, one of the very last prophets of the Old Testament period, is transported. It's like Habakkuk appears out of nowhere. Habakkuk has been preparing a meal, a dinner, and an angel of the Lord tells him, you take that dinner to Daniel. Daniel is in a den of lions, he has no food. And he's either going to get eaten up by the lions or he's going to starve to death, and then the lions will eat him. That's the game. And so Habakkuk, the prophet, appears to Daniel, gives him this lavish meal. 7 days he's in there. There's enough food to sustain him for 7 days, and when Nebuchadnezzar comes to make sure that Daniel is gone, there he is, healthy as he can be. Been eating well for 7 days. And Cyrus is astounded. Whoa, what happened there? I must have done something special. There we go. He spares Daniel and feeds his own army, his own men. Pretty cool story. We go over 4 other hero stories real quick, and we probably won't have time to get through all 4. So maybe I'll just tell you about who they are. We're not going to have time for all of them. Story of Tobit. This is another story that is clearly fictional. Now this one is set in Nineveh during the Assyrian captivity, the early captivity of the northern kingdom. And Tobit is like Susanna, actually, a very faithful, a super vigilant keeper of the Jewish law, particularly food laws and other things, circumcision, stuff like that. And there's a lot to this story, but eventually these things get him in trouble with the king. One of the things that Tobit has a habit of doing, because he's a faithful Jew, is he buries dead bodies, which are left out in the streets. He buries them overnight, because Jewish practice, of course, insists that a dead body be buried within 24 hours. And that's not happening in pagan culture, so Tobit makes sure that happens. And that gets him in trouble. He becomes blind and poor. Meanwhile, in a different part of the world, in media, we learn about this woman, Sarah, who is betrothed to a sequence of 7 husbands. And on the wedding night, in all 7 cases, now think about this, that husband dies in a horrific and graphic way before that marriage can be consummated. So Sarah's getting a little bit of a reputation there in India. You know, she's like the Black Widow, and she's not even a widow yet. And her father is very concerned. Very concerned. And so, fast forward Tobit's son, Tobias, is sent to marry Sarah. She is currently hanging out with a fellow named Asmodeus, who is possessed by an evil, by a demon. He's demon possessed. He's the one who's killing all the other would-be husbands. And all of the intricacies of the story are orchestrated by an angel of God named Raphael, who disguises himself as a human and tells Tobit that everything's going to work out. So Tobit sends his only son to way far away to marry this woman. Of course, he's at risk of not making it through that first night. But Raphael tells him there's a way that this will work. I also have a way to cure your father's blindness. You just believe and trust. And Tobias does that. Marries Sarah, and the night of their wedding night, things go a totally different way. I won't tell you the secret. You got to read the story to get that. But it works. And Tobias and Sarah live happily ever after. It's kind of a short version of that. They go back home to Tobias' home, and sure enough, there's a cure he has a cure for his father's blindness. And Tobit dies happy, wealthy, at home, and Tobias lives to see or to hear about the destruction of Nineveh. And of course, it's a good Jew who rejoices over that. During that same period, during the Assyrian period, during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, just a little bit later, this is getting close, of course, to the period of Daniel. So all these texts are sort of related. Is the story of Judith. If you've never read the story of Judith or heard it, strongly recommend. If you're only going to read one thing out of the Apocrypha, I suggest you might want to read the story. It is a great story, no matter where it comes from. Judith, and you may have heard of this story. It's actually been revamped in a lot of ways in various cultures over the years. Basically, Nebuchadnezzar has this supreme general who is a beast. He's perfect for the job of being a pagan general, but he's a really bad person. And Nebuchadnezzar wants to take over basically the whole world of his day as much as he can. Holofernes is his man. So Holofernes is the general who just runs roughshod over one culture after another, and he finally gets to the Jews. And the Jews in this particular town of Bethulia are going to resist. And all the cultures around, and even people inside the Jewish community say, this is stupid. You can't win in this situation. Just give up, But there's a woman, a widow, in the town of Judah. She's been a widow for some time. She's also very, very pious. I hope you're hearing there's a thread here. This is a very, very pious Jewish woman living by herself because she's widowed. And she says, I have an idea. I'll take care of this guy. I will deliver this city from Holofernes and Nebuchadnezzar. And she won't tell them how she's going to do it. She makes herself as beautiful as possible, and evidently that was not hard to do. She packs up a lot of food, food that Jews were allowed to eat, and she marches right into the camp of Holofernes, and she says, here I am, an emissary from from the Jewish people you're about to attack, and they're weak. If you play your cards right, you got no problem. Holofernes, of course, is immediately attracted to Judith, and he wants her, just like he wants the rest of the world, right? And he invites her to wine and dine with him, and she says, no, I can't do that. I brought my own food, brought my own drink, because my people can't eat what you're eating, we can't drink what you're drinking, sorry. But I'll see you tomorrow. And Holofernes says, okay. Does that for 3 days. And every night, during the night, she kind of sneaks out of the camp. She goes back home. She resupplies with food and so on. She creates a pattern of coming and going, all based on her religious practice, which people kind of accept. Well, that's weird. That's Jewish. But okay. On the third night, she finally accepts Holofernes' invitation. He throws a huge banquet, biggest banquet ever. And she actually goes. And she participates. And she says, oh, Holofernes, this is a great banquet. Have a little more wine. She keeps it going until he is plastered drunk. Takes him back to his tent with her. And to make a long story short, she cuts his head off. She puts his head in the bag. The bag she's been using to take the food back and forth, right? And she takes that head back to the Jewish camp, and she says, good morning. Holofernes, not a problem anymore. These people are like, awesome, how did you do that? So anyway, it is a great, great story. And the bottom line is no one ever again spread terror among the people of Israel in the days of Judah. I guess not, right? Or for a long time after her death. Fantastic story about a very powerful woman. And finally, the last one. Got out of time here, so we'll just have to make this very, very short. There are actually 4 books of the Maccabees. 2 of those are traditionally part of the Old Testament Apocrypha. The other 2 appear in various church traditions. The Eastern Orthodox Church likes one of them, and so on. But the 2 that are most often included, the 2 that are still in the Roman Catholic Bible, are the books of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. And they're very different books in some ways. They're both essentially history books. And they're modeled after the histories of the Old Testament books of Kings and Chronicles. Only they pick up the story at the end of the Old Testament period and take it up to they take it into the first 150 years or so AD. And the highlight of the story, of course, for the Jewish people, is the revolt of the Maccabees, led by Judas Maccabees, a son of the house, the family of the Hasmoneans, who became Jewish rulers in the early years of the first century, in response to horrible desecration of Antiochus IV. This is the guy who outlawed all Jewish practices, including food law, the dietary laws, circumcision, everything that was important to the Jews, and did all kinds of nasty, horrible stuff in the temple. And Judas Maccabeus and his family said, enough. We've got to do something about it. Big revolt. You read about it in First Maccabees. Second Maccabees is very different. It recounts the exact same stuff, actually, as the first part of First Maccabees. But, and this reminds me very much, it's been a while since you read Kings and Chronicles in the Old Testament. If you've ever wondered why there's a lot of repetition, seems like a lot of repetition there. Same kings, same story, same result. But they're very different. versions of that history. That's because, as in Maccabees here, the second Maccabees is a theological history. Not so much a political or historical history, but a theological one, which interprets those events from a Jewish theological perspective. And there's where you get a lot of interesting stuff, really interesting stuff, some of which is still very important to the Roman Catholic tradition. That's why they, I think, they retain the Apocrypha. Stuff like praying to saints, because saints are believed to intercede for people here on earth, kind of like angels. There's a lot of angelology in the second Maccabees and stuff like that. So I've got to go to work. And I really appreciate your attention, your time, your questions. I wish we had more time, but I hope you got something out of this series. And next week we go back to things as usual.